as you've seen there on the screens. And we now want to give those numbers some life. And I'm now joined by two gentlemen from PwC, and I'll be allowing them to introduce themselves. And we can start from you.
Thank you, Abby. My name is John Kamau. I'm a senior manager in the forensics unit at PwC. We serve Kenya, but also the East African region.
Fantastic.
And thank you for having us.
Thank you, John.
Okay, thank you, Abby. Monio Thoidi is my name, a partner at PwC. I'm the forensics leader for East Africa.
All right. And let me pick it up from you. Interesting numbers in this year's report. And perhaps for you, what stands out for the consumer?
What stands out for the consumer, or rather for organizations that have participated in the survey, in this case, at least 100 organizations with 116 respondents, is that consumer remains an important stakeholder for purposes of growing businesses. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, we are saying consumer is also a risk that businesses have to consider when they are engaging with them. Mm-hmm. We've seen trends in as far as how businesses are engaging with consumers, especially associated with technological advancements. And what has happened is that consumers are gaining more access to businesses than they would in the past, especially remotely, through the automation of various business processes.
Yes.
For example, the statistics that you just quoted, I would like to clarify, mm-hmm. they relate to the financial services industry.
Correct.
Where consumer fraud was the most prevalent fraud or economic crime that was experienced in the financial services industry, mm-hmm. Overtaking asset misappropriation and cybercrime, which previously were the most prevalent crimes.
All right.
When you reflect about financial services industry, it's probably one of the sectors where there's been a lot of investments in technology for the purposes of enhancing the customer experience, mm-hmm. convenience,
and
efficient
being part
execution.
Being part of the transition.
Yes, mm-hmm. But in the process, we are saying that the consumer has certain access than they used to previously, and so they are posing a threat through various other forms of economic crime, like cybercrime. Mm-hmm. And so we are saying as much as consumer remains, or the customer remains the lifeblood of businesses, we must manage the risk associated with dealing with our customers.
All right.
And some of the ways that we've highlighted in our report, because we think they are blind spots and we want organizations to consider,
sure.
is through very robust know your customer procedures in as far as onboarding of your customers is concerned.
All right.
But beyond that is the profiling of your consumers or customers and ability to be able to leverage technology to monitor trends or patterns so that you can be able to detect any suspicious activity or transactions, yes. and do something about it in a proactive manner as opposed to a reactive manner.
All right. And let me bring in John. Looking at, picking off from your colleague, we're seeing some interesting trends as well when it comes to the nature of incidents that are reported by the consumers. Perhaps just walk us through the most prevalent and the most common when it comes to these attacks.
Okay, maybe again just to clarify, so our respondents are the businesses themselves,
sure.
or people in management, mm-hmm. both within the private sector and the public sector. Mm-hmm. So consumers are just one, I would say, part of the perpetrators of the fraud. Mm-hmm. But in terms of the forms, the question was, what form of crime have you suffered as an organization?
Yes.
And the most prevalent was asset misappropriation. And this has been the case in a number of our past surveys. Mm-hmm. Actually, the trend is that we've seen a significant drop from 72% the last time round in 2016 to 48% this time round. And we believe it's because we've now introduced a new category, or partly because we've now introduced a new category, yes. the fraud by the consumer. Mm-hmm. Because asset misappropriation by itself is really theft. Mm-hmm. It's where you have theft and you're not using force. Otherwise, if you're using force, then PwC
sure.
wouldn't be involved. It would be a police issue. Mm-hmm. But where you have theft without the use of force, then we term that as asset misappropriation. And historically, that has been the most prevalent form of fraud or economic crime.
Okay.
Consumer, fraud by the consumer, we've already discussed that. The third most prevalent in Kenya has been procurement fraud. Mm-hmm. So procurement fraud, again, we introduced it as a category some few years back. And in Kenya, it seems to be quite a big issue because compared, for instance, to East Africa, mm-hmm. where the average prevalence rate is 25%, in Kenya, the rate is 34%. So we feel procurement fraud is one of the types of frauds that is raising the Kenyan numbers.
So how are these frauds, like you're saying, how are they committed?
So it will take different forms. So for instance, if it's asset misappropriation, it could be that somebody is actually using a computer to steal your data, for instance. Or it could be that somebody is a customer in a supermarket and they shoplift. So the definition will be that you have lost an asset, so we categorize that as asset misappropriation.
All right.
If it's procurement fraud, then it has something to do with procurement. So either you've had to pay a bribe during a procurement process, or maybe you procured something and something different was delivered. So again, when we talk of the forms, they are not distinct. So you could actually have one form of fraud, say asset misappropriation, where you use a computer, so the respondent will say, I suffered both asset misappropriation and cybercrime.
All right. And let me bounce it off back to you as we also get your closing thoughts. From a forensics standpoint, how can companies also sort of safeguard themselves when it comes to digital systems and embracing technologies that are waterproof or tight enough for them to be able to sort of seal off any intrusions?
Yeah, and one of the ways is actually investing in the right technology. But beyond the technology, it's how it has actually been configured to ensure that it does not leave for gaps that may be taken advantage of.
All right.
So beyond the implementation of the technology is regular checks or vulnerability tests or fraud risk assessments within those particular computer systems to identify gaps in a proactive manner that can be taken advantage of. So you are ahead of the curve, as opposed to reacting when an incident has occurred. You are doing that. And that's actually one of the key highlights of our survey this time round. We are seeing more and more organizations doing more proactive fraud risk assessments, engaging external consultants to advise them in as far as risk and compliance is concerned. And that may actually be a driver of the increase in the incidence of the economic crime that has been reported by Kenyan organizations. Right. And beyond investing in corporate controls, which is what I've described, again, corporate culture, it's very important because beyond machines, there are human beings that operate these tools.
There's the giver and there's the taker.
Absolutely.
Right.
So it's very important to have a value-based mode of operation where employees actually live the organization's values as opposed to just being able to recognize or recite them. So that's very important. And people having confidence in your fraud risk management programs so that when they notice a concern, they are able to report and they have confidence that something will be done about it. So it's a combination of various strategies too.
Many thanks, gentlemen. We appreciate and we'll continue to sift through the report for more.
Thank you very much.
Well, let's take you now to